What happens when a late-night talk show host decides to ask the questions everyone else is afraid to ask? And what happens when a guest refuses to play by the usual softball rules of celebrity interviews? Tonight, television witnessed something that had never happened before in the history of The Tonight Show. Every single word led to one of the most explosive moments in late-night television history. The studio audience buzzed with anticipation as Jimmy Fallon wrapped up his opening monologue. It had been the usual blend of political jokes and celebrity gossip, but tonight felt different. An electricity hung in the air, tension that seemed to reach beyond the cameras into living rooms across America. The guest list had been the talk of social media for weeks, and now the moment had finally arrived. "Ladies and gentlemen," Jimmy announced with his trademark grin, "please welcome Donald Trump." The applause that followed was mixed. Enthusiastic cheers clashed with scattered boos. Trump emerged from backstage with his trademark confident stride, waving to the crowd as he approached the guest chair. He wore a navy blue suit and his signature red tie, his expression that of a man who believed he owned every room he entered. "Donald, welcome back to The Tonight Show," Jimmy said as they sat down. "It's great to have you here." "Jimmy, fantastic to be back," Trump replied, adjusting his tie. "I have to say, your ratings have been incredible lately. Really tremendous numbers, and I'm sure having me on tonight is going to make them even better." "Well, we certainly hope so," Jimmy answered. "So let's talk about your recent speeches. You've been making some pretty bold statements about the economy." Trump leaned back, eyebrows raised. "Jimmy, let me tell you something. When you're right, absolutely right about everything like I am, people call it bold. But it's not bold. It's just the truth. The economy under my leadership was the greatest this country has ever seen, and everyone knows it. But economists have different opinions about those numbers," Jimmy pressed, his tone light but edged. "Some say the growth started before you took office." Trump's expression tightened almost imperceptibly. "Some economists? Jimmy, are you talking about the fake economists? The ones who said we'd never see 3% growth? The ones who said the stock market would crash if I got elected? Those economists?" The audience murmured, sensing the mood shift. Jimmy kept his smile, though it was clear he had entered uncharted waters for what was supposed to be a lighthearted appearance. "I'm just saying there are different perspectives," he continued. "What about the deficit numbers during your term?" "The deficit?" Trump's voice rose. "Jimmy, are you seriously going to sit here and lecture me about the deficit? Do you know what the deficit was when I left office compared to what it is now?" "Do you even have any idea what you're talking about?" From the wings, Jimmy's producer signaled subtle hand gestures, urging him to move on. But Jimmy didn't. "I'm not lecturing anyone. I'm just asking questions. Isn't that what journalism is about?" "Journalism?" Trump let out a laugh devoid of humor. "Jimmy, you're a comedian. You play silly games with celebrities and make people laugh. That's fine. That's great. But don't pretend you're some kind of serious journalist now." The studio fell into an uneasy silence. For a fleeting moment, Jimmy's smile faltered, but he forced it back. "You're right. I am a comedian. But I'm also curious about the issues that matter to the people watching tonight." "The issues that matter?" Trump leaned forward. "Jimmy, let me tell you what matters. What matters is that you invited me on your show, and now you're trying to ambush me with gotcha questions like some third-rate reporter. Is that what this is? Your attempt to be the next big political interviewer?" "Donald, I'm not trying to ambush anyone," Jimmy said, his voice still steady, though the tension between them was undeniable. Jimmy kept his tone steady, though his jaw was tense. "I'm asking the same questions I'd ask any political figure." "Any political figure?" Trump repeated, sitting forward in his chair. "Jimmy, I'm not any political figure. I'm the most successful president this country has ever had. And I don't appreciate being treated like some wannabe politician who has to prove himself to a late-night talk show host." The audience was completely silent now, the atmosphere thick with discomfort. Jimmy glanced toward his producer, then back at Trump. "I think maybe we got off on the wrong foot here." "Wrong foot?" Trump leaned in, fully animated now. "Jimmy, there's no wrong foot. There's just you trying to make a name for yourself by attacking me, and me not putting up with it. You want to play hardball? Fine. Let's talk about your ratings before you started booking controversial guests. Let's talk about how desperate your show has become." Jimmy's composure was visibly tested. His fingers gripped his stack of cue cards tightly. My show isn't desperate, Donald. We book guests our audience wants to see. Your audience wants to see a train wreck, Trump shot back. They want to see you try to take me down and fail miserably. And congratulations, Jimmy. You're giving them exactly what they want. The tension in Studio 6B had reached a breaking point. Jimmy's smile strained under the weight of the moment, but he tried to sound diplomatic. Donald, I think you're misunderstanding my intentions. I'm not trying to attack you. I'm trying to have a conversation. A conversation? Trump sneered. Jimmy, this isn't a conversation. This is you reading off a list of talking points that sound like they came straight out of an opposition research file. Who wrote these questions for you? I wrote my own questions, Jimmy insisted, his smile finally beginning to crack. Just like I do for every guest. Really? Trump leaned back with a smirk. So when you had that pop star on last week, did you grill her about her tax returns? When you had that comedian on, did you interrogate him about his business dealings? Or is this special treatment just reserved for me? The audience shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Some exchanged uneasy glances. Others stared at their phones, and a few actually got up to leave. Behind the cameras, producers whispered urgently to each other, their faces drawn tight with panic. Every guest is different, Jimmy said, his voice tight but professional. Political figures naturally get asked political questions. Political figures? Trump barked, growing louder. Jimmy, I'm not some career politician. I'm a businessman who served his country. I built an empire before I ever stepped foot in Washington. And I'll still be successful long after all these career politicians are forgotten. And that's great, Jimmy replied, trying to de-escalate. Your business success is well documented. But when you're discussing running for office again, people have legitimate questions about your previous term. Legitimate questions. Trump abruptly rose from his chair, towering over the seated host. Jimmy, let me ask you a legitimate question. How much are they paying you to do this? Because I know what your contract looks like. I know what your ratings were before you started playing politics. Jimmy's mouth fell open slightly. Nobody is paying me to do anything except host my show. Trump gestured around the studio. Jimmy, this isn't your show anymore. This is a political hit job disguised as entertainment. You've turned into another puppet for the establishment media, and you don't even realize it. That's completely unfair, Jimmy said, standing up now as well. I've had politicians from both parties on this show. I treat everyone with respect. Respect? Trump laughed bitterly. Is this what you call respect? Ambushing your guests with hostile questions? Making them defend themselves instead of promoting their projects? When was the last time you asked a Democrat about their failed policies? The studio was now in chaos. Audience members murmured loudly, some calling out cheers of support for Trump, others shouting their disapproval. The air buzzed with division. I ask tough questions when they're warranted, Jimmy said, raising his voice to be heard over the noise. That's what good interviewers do. Good interviewers? Trump pointed directly at him. Good interviewers don't invite someone on under false pretenses. You told my people this would be a light conversation about business and entertainment. Instead, you're trying to recreate some kind of gotcha moment for your highlight reel, Trump snapped. The questions I'm asking are fair game for any public figure, Jimmy shot back, his composure finally cracking. If you can't handle basic scrutiny, maybe you shouldn't be seeking public office. The words hung in the air like a challenge. Trump's face darkened, and for a long moment the studio fell completely silent. Even the producers in the wings stopped their frantic discussions, waiting to see what would happen next. Can't handle scrutiny? Trump's voice was dangerously quiet. Jimmy, I've been scrutinized by every intelligence agency, every prosecutor, every hostile reporter in this country for years. You think your little comedy show questions are going to rattle me? Then why are you so upset? Jimmy asked, his tone sharpening with defiance. I'm not upset, Trump replied coolly, adjusting his suit jacket. I'm disappointed. I'm disappointed that someone I considered a friend would stab me in the back on national television. I'm disappointed that a show that's supposed to bring joy has turned into another political battlefield. This doesn't have to be a battlefield, Jimmy said quickly. We can have a civil discussion about important issues. Civil discussion? Trump shook his head. Jimmy, there's nothing civil about what you're doing here. You're trying to embarrass me, and it's not going to work. I've been dealing with tougher opponents than you for decades. The audience was restless now. Some stood and pointed toward the stage. Security guards at the exits grew more visible, while the cameras cut to wide shots to capture the chaos spreading through the studio. "I'm not your opponent," Jimmy said, his voice carrying a note of desperation. "I'm just asking questions people want answered." "People want answered?" Trump gestured toward the crowd. "Look around, Jimmy. Half your audience is walking out. The other half is arguing with each other. This isn't entertainment, this is a disaster. And you created it." Jimmy glanced at the audience. Many were indeed heading for the exits while others shouted across aisles at each other. His carefully crafted brand of lighthearted comedy was crumbling in real time. The chaos reached a fever pitch as his producer frantically gestured from the wings, slicing his hand across his throat to signal a commercial break. But Jimmy seemed frozen, locked into the confrontation unfolding before him. "You know what, Donald?" Jimmy said, his voice trembling with a mix of anger and adrenaline. "Maybe some of my audience is leaving, but at least they're seeing the real you, not the polished version your handlers want people to see." Trump's eyes narrowed dangerously. "The real me? Jimmy, you wouldn't know the real me if it hit you in the face. The real me built a billion-dollar empire. The real me created jobs for thousands. The real me made this country respected again around the world. The real you also refuses to answer a simple question about economic policy," Jimmy fired back, abandoning his usual charm completely. "The real you turns every conversation into a personal attack." "Personal attack?" Trump stepped closer to Jimmy's desk. "You want to see a personal attack? Let's talk about how your show has alienated half your audience by turning into a political hack job. Let's talk about how NBC probably regrets ever giving you this job." The audience erupted into complete uproar. Some cheered, others booed, and many simply shouted over one another. Camera operators scrambled to capture the chaos while producers tried desperately to salvage the sinking broadcast. "At least I'm not afraid to ask hard questions," Jimmy shouted above the din. "At least I'm not just another person kissing up to you and telling you how wonderful you are." Trump laughed harshly. "Jimmy, these aren't hard questions. These are amateur hour gotcha attempts from someone who's way out of his league. You want to play journalist? Go back to school and learn how to do it properly." "I don't need to go back to school," Jimmy snapped, his face flushed red. "I need guests who can handle adult conversations without having meltdowns on my stage." "Meltdown?" Trump's voice rose to match his. "The only person having a meltdown here is you. Jimmy, you're watching your career implode in real time because you thought you could take on Donald Trump and win." At that moment, Jimmy's producer finally rushed onto the stage, grabbing his arm. "We need to go to commercial," he whispered urgently, though his voice was picked up by the microphones. "No," Jimmy said, shaking him off. "We're not going to commercial. We're going to finish this conversation like adults." "Adults?" Trump straightened his tie, turned to the main camera, and spoke directly to the audience. "Jimmy, adults don't ambush their guests. Adults don't turn their entertainment shows into political hit pieces. Adults have integrity," Trump shot back, and Jimmy bristled. "Don't talk to me about integrity," Jimmy said, pointing directly at him. "You're the one who came on my show and immediately started attacking my ratings, my program, and my career, just because I asked a few legitimate questions." Trump faced him, contempt obvious. "There was nothing legitimate about this setup from the moment I walked out here. This was a planned assassination attempt on my character, and everyone in this studio knows it." Security began to reposition around the stage as the audience grew angrier. Arguments erupted in the front rows and ushers scrambled to restore order. "Nobody planned anything," Jimmy insisted, desperation creeping into his voice. "I prepared questions just like I do for every interview." Trump shook his head, incredulous. "Jimmy, you're either lying or completely delusional. This was a setup from the beginning and now you're playing the victim because it backfired." Jimmy's head of security leaned in, spoke quietly. Jimmy nodded, the fight in his eyes giving way to a weary finality. "Donald, I think it's time for you to leave," he said, calm but firm. The studio fell silent for the first time in 20 minutes. Trump stared at him as if weighing the absurdity of the demand. "You heard me," Jimmy repeated. "This interview is over. I'm asking you to leave my show." For several slow seconds, Trump stood frozen. Then a slow smile crept across his face. "You're kicking me off your show?" he asked, almost amused. "Yes," Jimmy said, arms crossed. Trump's tone shifted to measured menace. "This is the biggest mistake you've ever made in your career," he said. "You just kicked off the most interesting guest you've ever had, and everyone watching knows it." "Maybe," Jimmy answered, "but it's my show, and that's my decision." Trump swept his gaze over the audience and many of them on their feet, then toward Jimmy. Addressing the cameras and the crowd, he said, "Ladies and gentlemen, you just witnessed something that's never happened before in television history. A talk show host so afraid of real conversation that he kicks off his own guest rather than engage honestly." Security flanked him as he straightened his jacket and prepared to leave. "This has been very revealing, Jimmy. Very revealing indeed." As Trump walked off the stage, the studio erupted in a fierce mix of cheers and boos. Jimmy stood alone behind his desk, watching his guest vanish into the wings while the set descended into chaos. Producers rushed onto the stage. The lights and cameras whirred. "We'll be right back," Jimmy managed into the camera, but his voice was thin against the roar of the crowd. The broadcast cut away, leaving viewers at home with one of the most shocking moments in late-night television seared into their memories. What do you think caused this meltdown? Was Jimmy right to press with tough questions? Or did he cross a line? Drop your thoughts in the comments below and don't forget to hit subscribe. We'll be breaking down every single detail of this historic television moment,